Okay, Josh and Wendy, you're up.
Hey, Bart, did you make us the presenter already?
Nope, I will.
Thanks.
There you go.
You are now the presenter.
Perfect. There we go. Love it. Sorry, guys, we're getting there. Okay, Wendy, you can go ahead and start us off.
So should we be able to see something else?
Nope.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. Well, welcome back. I saw that Ani was logged in, so welcome back, Ani, from last week. And Jennifer, I see that you're here as well. So hello, it's nice to see you in quotation marks. We wanted to start off today, the session is going to be about Tier 2, but we wanted to start off asking if there are any questions from last session about Tier 1 practices or implementation. Josh went through all of the components of Tier 1, and so that's a fairly long task list of things to do. So just wanted to take a second and see if there were any questions from our last session. Oh, uh-oh. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just go on.
Oh, yeah.
But shouldn't we be able to see?
She's building that.
Okay.
Oh, do you want notes pages or no?
Oh, I think this is okay, but can we see if somebody raises their hand or has something to say?
They'll just have to yell at us.
Okay, all right. So Josh is just telling, all I'm seeing is the PowerPoint screen. So if,
Oh, cool.
okay.
And some Facebook.
And some Facebook that's popping up. So please just shout out if you have a question. I wanted to start off by saying that some of the information I'll be sharing with you today, I need to credit to my sources on pbis.org, and also I've become familiar with the Northeast Positive Behavior Support Network with support from Dr. Sugai. He introduced me to this network, and they are creating some unbelievable things, some unbelievable materials, and I have been going there and using quite a bit of their stuff. So I do need to give credit to those two sources, and what that means is we can basically steal anything from their sites. So I also want to say, just to start off, in an effort to avoid confusion, and I do this a lot, I will use MTSS behavior and PBIS interchangeably. I know that this platform is for those who are working in the area of MTSS behavior. It's just a really hard practice for me to change, so just know I'll use those interchangeably. Just as a reminder, we know that MTSS has become the overarching framework or umbrella for the tiered systems approach, and PBIS is one of those tiered approaches for behavior. So taking the PBIS logic and applying it to the MTSS framework just goes hand in hand. So hopefully that does not cause too much confusion for anyone out there. Okay, so getting started very quickly, just a review of Tier 1 components. Josh went through all of this last time. The vocabulary or the wording might be a little bit different, but again, this is a slide that I took from the Northeast Positive Behavior Support Network that outlines all of the components of Tier 1, and he went through all of those with you, and then I provided a timeline of real-life implementation that's going on right now with one of our schools. And again, this is just a quick pause for any questions about the components that were discussed last time, because we're going to jump right into readiness for Tier 2 and then Tier 1 or Tier 2 practices. So that beep beep doesn't mean anything. Okay. Okay. All right. I think we have more people logging in. Okay. So we will get started with Tier 2 today. So in terms of behavior, it is often said that we really strive to have a solid Tier 1 implementation before we move on to Tier 2 practices. The reason for that is we don't want to overload or overwhelm a system with having too many kids requiring Tier 2 or Tier 3 support. So we want to make sure that Tier 1 is solidly in place. Having said that, we know that it's not realistic to not do anything and to not intervene and not respond to students' needs at Tier 2 and Tier 3. And sometimes we have to do that before our Tier 1 is solidly in place. So we do recognize that we're not working in a controlled environment where we can introduce independent variables one at a time. But just know if you have the time and the planning and you can get that solid Tier 1 in place and cover all of those components that Josh went through last time, you will be far better off and have fewer students at Tier 2 where you're working to minimize or mitigate those behaviors and hopefully move those kids down. And then also in Tier 3 where we're just working to reduce the intensity, frequency, and duration of those behaviors. We know that those students may not truly ever be in that green zone, but we hope to make those behaviors lessen. So what I'm going to share with you now is a readiness checklist that can be found at the northeastpbs.org website, and it's called Tier 2 Readiness Checklist. It's under the Tier 1 School-Wide tab. I'm not going to go through this checklist with you in detail, but I'm going to just kind of give you an overview because until you're ready to really look at this, it's probably not going to be as meaningful to go through this in detail. Now, one thing that I will tell you, this tool will make suggestions to different data sources. So it will take you through a series of questions. All of the data sources can be found on pbis.org. And this is a really nice chart here of all of the different fidelity tools and measures that can be used. I'll just kind of briefly talk about some of them. I will say that the first one, the TFI, the Tiered Fidelity Inventory, is the one that the WDE has used for implementing MTSS behavior, so that should look really, really familiar. I think anytime you can use that tool, that's going to be useful for the state's feedback. It does ask questions about all tiers, and Bart can maybe jump in here, but I think having those data sources from schools who are using some of these practices would be helpful for the WDE to have that feedback. And also on the pbis.org website, if you click these are all live links and it'll take you right to the tool. It will make reference to the SET, the school-wide evaluation tool, and I can't remember if we've talked about it in this platform or another one, but that is really more of a research tool where you'll have external folks come into your school and conduct a series of questions to your team, your teachers, and even the students, and then that feedback is used more at the state level for state-level implementation and research as well. The benchmark of quality, I think, is a great tool for looking at Tier 1, and the team implementation checklist is also a great tool to use. So again, all of these things can be found on pbis.org. So as you're seeing these fidelity measures pop up, just know that you can go here and under data sources and find any of these tools that you need. Okay, so let's talk about what the Tier 2 Readiness Action Planning Guide looks like. So as we said, it's desirable, it's going to be in your best interest, if possible, to have those Tier 1 components addressed. And some of the questions that will be asked are on this Readiness Action Planning Guide. This is just a scoring sheet, a cover sheet, and like I said, I'm not going to go through the whole guide with you because it may not be particularly relevant if you're not looking at Tier 2 implementation right now. I just want you to know where you can go to find some of this information. It's going to be asking if Tier 1 is implemented with Fidelity. This tool is actually a packet that's several pages long. It will tell you how to assess that. It will say something like a 70% score on the tiered fidelity inventory, just on the subscale, the Tier 1 subscale. It'll say 80% on the school-wide evaluation tool, or 70% on the benchmark of quality, or if you're using Swiss, you can also use that for some of the criteria. You go through each of these questions, and on the readiness guide, it will give you examples of suggested data sources and what kind of score you need to have to say our Tier 1 readiness has been met. This sheet will show you how you can make, if you're not quite where you need to be, some action steps, who would be responsible for those action steps, when you might want to review this, and what resources you'll be using. So just this list here of 8 items gives you some things to think about before moving on to Tier 2. And again, I'm not going to go through those in detail. It's just I want you to know where the resources are when you're ready for them. Okay. I will pause here as we switch. Any questions so far on this Tier 2 readiness checklist?
Okay, well, we're going to jump into the nitty-gritty of our behavior interventions then. And as Wendy already stated, we started off last time really getting into Tier 1. And I think that Wendy has a great point when she says that if you put most of your time, your resources into Tier 1, that's going to be the biggest bang for your buck. Unfortunately, we're going to have some kids who don't necessarily respond to the Tier 1, or, you know, in reality, a lot of schools, the one I work in as well, Tier 1 is pretty good, but it's not perfect. And so I do think it's important to really look at that fidelity checklist to try to get your Tier 1 as strong as possible. However, it doesn't mean, hey, let's not do any Tier 2 stuff yet until that's fixed. Now there's going to be kids who need this now. So we're going to talk about 5 different types of intervention that you guys can use, and we'll kind of be going back and forth between Wendy and myself, just based on things that we have more experience with and knowledge, things like that. But let's jump into it. And really, before I get into the interventions specifically, I want to share with you guys the process that we used at my school anyway to kind of select those interventions for those different kids. Okay, what you see on this slide is a behavior screening tool, the SRSS that we use, and you can see there's some kids here who are kind of at risk, kind of this pinkish, it's really a red. And then so what we did is as we get these back each time we give them to them, give the SRSS to our teachers, we look at which kids are coming back at high risk, and are they receiving any kind of an additional intervention. And if they are, we'll come over here to the side, which this is not really easy to read, so I apologize for that. But we'll write in here, yeah, this kid's already receiving a check-in, check-out program. This kid also participates in some counseling services. It looks like one-on-one, and as well a social skills group. So we'll type those things in there kind of next to each kid. And I should say that each one of these lines as it goes across is a different kid. Okay, so it looks like I don't know how many there are in here, but there's a handful. And then we also look and we can see that this kid up here, externalizing behavior, we're seeing some issues. There's nothing in place for that kid, so we do a little brainstorming. Now, when I say we, typically that includes kind of we have like a little core behavior team. And so I'm on that as a special education person. We have a behavior monitor who's on that, a counselor, sometimes our psychologist. And this is just one teacher's class. So again, we might sit down and brainstorm some of these ideas. Like we think, well, I think mentoring would be good for this kid. And over here you can see this particular child has a couple things, but we also think, hey, let's add some mentoring and maybe update this behavior plan. in which case we would have a conversation with that teacher, all right, and say, do you feel like mentoring would be a good thing for this kid? The data kind of helps highlight who's at risk, and to some extent on this particular tool, we can look across these different areas on here: negative attitude, shy and withdrawn, whatever it is, peer rejection, and we can make some kind of an assumption or guess at what might be a good fit for that kid. But ultimately, some of the best work would be to talk with the parent and the teacher to say, I think a check-in, check-out is the right program for this kid, or a meaningful work program, or maybe just a check and connect. Anyway, I'm kind of expounding on that. But we'll go through every single class and look at who's at risk, what are they already getting in terms of intervention, and then do we need to add, change? Are there some new kids popping up that maybe we need to look at? Are there some kids that maybe we don't need to have on there anymore? And we do that right here on this sheets with the SRSS, which makes it really convenient. And then we just make a quick little list. I've got a bunch of names on here. Fortunately, I remembered to take off all their last names. But anyway, we just say, okay, here's our kids in check in, check out. All right, let's get with our person who's doing that. Make sure that they're all up to date. That person will quickly touch base with the teacher and create the check-in, check-out, which we'll talk about later. Here's our kids that are getting some mentoring. Here's some kids in our social skills group. It's just nice to do this because it really helps us just kind of put everything into one form, into one spot where we can see all the kids that are going to participate in some kind of a Tier 2 intervention. Okay. Are there any questions on that kind of process that we use to select those kids and put them in different interventions? And any of the people who are on this right now, have you guys used a process that you find helpful, something you want to share? Nada. Okay, well, we're going to jump into each intervention now. I'm going to turn it back over to Wendy, and she's going to talk to us about meaningful work.
Okay, hello again. With Tier 2 interventions, I think it's probably safe to say less is more. It's not more important to have a whole bunch of different interventions, but to have a few interventions that your school does very, very well, and you have different interventions that can reach a variety of different purposes or students. So again, sometimes people think, oh, we have to offer 10 different Tier 2 options or programs, and I guess my opinion would be just do a few and do them well and get them embedded in your system, and I think that's a really good place to start. So I want to talk about meaningful work, and I've taken this term from Safe and Civil Schools. This is actually a program that Randy Sprick and a few others created. If you're familiar with Safe and Civil Schools, you know that they have a national conference every year, and I believe it's in June in Portland, and it's great because you can sign up for instance, this Tier 2 intervention on meaningful work, and I think it's a half day or a full day training, and you have all of the materials and all the information that you need to use this as a Tier 2 intervention. So this is a great resource. This is what the book looks like, and check into the conference in June if you're looking for some training on positive behavior supports. So what I will say about meaningful work is, I guess, as a school counselor, I was using meaningful work in a different way, but what you'll find if you have access to this book is they have so many different ideas of the kind of work that kids can do. So when I became connected with this material, it was just wonderful because it took what I already knew on a small level, and then it just kind of opened the door to the possibilities of how this could be used. So Meaningful Work is a school-based jobs program that gives students responsibility and helps them to develop purpose, self-worth, and a sense of belonging. This positive behavior support can help students with a history of misbehavior and school failure become contributing members of their schools. So this is a quote from how they describe their program. So I will say, not related to this side, but just some of the previous work that I had done, we would find students, and whether they were having behavioral issues or attendance issues, and we really wanted to find a way to help them become engaged in their school community. When kids are missing a lot of school, disengagement is happening. When kids are missing a lot of school, reinforcement is not available. That's an indication that reinforcement is not available. So to find these meaningful jobs where kids can get reinforcement and they also feel like it's important to be there at school, that they can't miss a day because no one else can do their job, really reaches, has lots of benefits there. So a couple, for instance, I remember having the patriotic student, and these were the students that were in charge of putting the flag up every day and taking them down. Now, we took this very seriously. We had the American Legion come and do a training on how you hold a flag, how you fold a flag, how you raise a flag, all of the steps involved in being responsible for the flag. And then we always had two students, and they would typically be the ones that were disengaged or maybe missing a little too much school, and we found that by giving them this job, or particularly the ones who were tardy, they had to be there before everyone else and get the flag up first thing in the morning. So you can see how it reaches a couple of purposes. And then there was some pride because there were only two students in the whole school that were in charge of the flag. And then that job went for an entire year. And then those kids got to train the next one or two kids that would be the next patriotic or flag students. So I guess I use this just on a really small scale, but I'm going to kind of share with you how to start out with meaningful work. It suggests to start small with just one or two high-need students and then build on that. You would review your data of what the students' needs are, so what Josh just showed you would be a perfect tool to use, and set some goals. Do we want this student to become more engaged? Do we want them to be more outgoing and advocate for themselves? Do we want them to be on time? Do we want them to be here? Because it's important that you match the student to the job. And I know having jobs in school is not new. A lot of times it was like help the custodian, and there's nothing wrong with helping the custodian, but this is just expanded on that idea in so many different ways. So we make sure that we always use data to monitor progress, and the way that we can do that is having a very clear job description. How many times a week does the job occur, at what time, and we start working on skills for being on time and how you conduct yourself when you're at your job. Also, many of these jobs have built-in rewards from their supervisors. Supervisors, as you can imagine, would also be adult mentors, and they're people that they connect with in just another way. And they also help them to learn about the responsibilities of the job and some pre-vocational type skills. It's important that the job is introduced very formally. What is expected? What does it look like? Kind of the I do, we do, you do model. So students are not guessing what their job looks like. They know exactly what they need to do, what materials they need, and what areas they should be in. Job training occurs. And we always look at their plans and review and modify them just in case we have a student that's mismatched with a particular job. It's not quite their interest. They're not connecting with the job or the supervisor. We're finding, maybe they're late. It's just something that they're not connecting with for whatever reason. And celebrating their accomplishments. This is what's great, because just inherently this supervisor, this mentor, they find lots of ways to show the student that they really appreciate what they're doing and how they're helping the school. And, they just give them little cards and reminders and of how they're appreciated. And you talk about recognition and reinforcement at its most powerful. So it works out great. So those are some things to think about before you start placing students in jobs. Now, the meaningful work job has about 75 different examples of different jobs. So this is where I'm saying I had a few ideas like serving lunch in the lunchroom and library helper and the patriotic student, but this book just has really great ideas. The one I love is the coffee cup collector. If you think about it, teachers always have a coffee cup or some kind of a drink cup on their desk that they wish wasn't on their desk at the end of the day. And having a student who comes around with a basket to say, hey, I'm here to collect your cup for the day and take it to the kitchen. The teachers appreciate it. It's an opportunity for the students to be reinforced by coming into contact with lots of different adults. They're providing a job that the teachers really appreciate, and they get a little bit of special time during the day to do that. So I've just put a few examples. I just flipped through the book. All of these are great ideas. Lost and found manager, lunch server, bus cone manager. So you can see that these are jobs that are done every day in the school. They're necessary jobs. It's not a made-up job. It's not a place just to have a kid. These are opportunities for them to come in contact with reinforcement and become engaged in their school. And that's what meaningful work is all about. Okay, so before I turn it back over to Josh, I'm going to talk about Check and Connect for just a minute. Or before I do that, how about if I pause to see if there are any questions about meaningful work, or if you have some great school-based jobs that you've used in your schools with your kids. Is this supposed to be next? Check and Connect?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what's hard not to see who's on. So.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch actually.
Okay. All right, so I'm not hearing anyone jump in, and I can't see if there's a hand raised. So we will leave meaningful work, but again, you should be able to find those resources very easily. I'm happy to share information if you, it's not a large book, but it's lots of pages, so I think it would be difficult to copy everything, but I'm certainly happy to share some things if you would like to email. All right, so we're going to move on to another Tier 2 intervention called Check and Connect, and really this is just for awareness. This is just information. I'm not going to go through the Check and Connect program, but I know when I was looking at this initially, you will find a lot of different programs under the title of Check and Connect, and what I found is, and what I think I understand is, Check and Connect is out of the University of Minnesota. The program started about 25 years ago at the University of Minnesota, and it's a very comprehensive program. So you will see other programs maybe referred to as Check and Connect, but if it's not out of the University of Minnesota, then it's probably something different, and this is what their logo looks like. So what I discovered in talking to this group, that because it is such a comprehensive mentoring program, it does require about 3 days of on-site training. They send a couple of trainers out, and I think you can train about 30 people, and they take you through their evidence-based process or practice. And this is listed on What Works Clearinghouse. There's a lot of research behind Check and Connect out of the University of Minnesota. So if this is something you would like to look into, that's where you could start. So I'm just going to read a little explanation here. Check and Connect is implemented by a trained mentor whose primary goal is to keep education a salient issue for disengaged students and their teachers and family members. The mentor works with a caseload of students and families over time and follows their caseload from program to program and school to school. So you can see that this is probably a little bit different than just finding a preferred adult or preferred teacher that checks in with the student. But again, just to know that when we say Check and Connect, we're talking about this program, but there are other versions of mentoring programs as well. But this one has quite a bit of research behind it. Okay.
Okay, looks like we're back to me. Thanks, Wendy. Okay, so let's jump into the next one. This is one that I've had quite a bit of experience with just in the school that I'm working in now. Although I don't actually run the check-in, check-out program, I have a behavior monitor who does a fantastic job with this. And one of the things about check-in, check-out, at least that I noticed, is this is a super powerful intervention if it's done really well and if it's done with the correct kids. This really works well for kids who are very attention-seeking, who like to have contact with different adults. And what it comes down to is we have a staff person who at our school is the behavior monitor, and she's really in charge of the whole intervention. And at any given time, we probably have between half a dozen and 10 kids who participate in the program. And our school has about 500 kids. Certainly we have room to grow that and get some more kids in there. But you don't want it to be too overwhelming either. Okay. So what happens is this staff person gets with the students' teachers. So as I talked about earlier, we've selected some kids. We felt like, oh man, check in, check out would be good for these guys. Let's get our staff person together to go meet with the kids' teachers. And they create kind of a daily tracker. And I'm going to show you guys an example of one in just a minute. And on that tracker, there may be a goal. Might even be 2 goals. Probably don't really want more than that. Maybe 1 or 2 goals for the day. So an example, well, I'll show you a couple examples in just a sec. And then that it's really important to have that teacher is involved in creating this tracker, because they're ultimately the one that throughout the day will be working with that student and kind of rating them on how they do. Now, if this is a secondary situation, which mine's not, it's elementary, but if you're in secondary school, this would work just the same, except for you would have multiple staff persons who would probably be involved in putting this together, and in which case, as they go through each period, they would probably get rated. Okay, super flexible, because that tracker can be, there could be 3 check-ins throughout the day with teachers, or there could be 8. It just depends on the kid's needs, and I'm not going to get way into the intricacies of this. There's plenty of reading and things you guys can do and training that you can do on this, but it's really, really a neat program, okay? And then the staff person meets with each student at the beginning of the day, and they go over their little tracker and their goal. Or goals. And we have a little part on ours. Well, I'll just show you that. Throughout the day, the teacher rates the students, and then at the end of the day, the staff person meets again with those students to see if they had completed their goal. So let me just show you real quick what our little tracker sheet looks like. This is just one of our kids' tracker sheets. And you can see this kid has 2 goals. One, pretty easy, just follow directions and say okay, first time, right? And then persevere and work hard. And it really is kind of up to the teacher and that student to really kind of define these and what does it look like to persevere and work hard. It's important that that's not ambiguous. It needs to be kind of clear what it is that they need to do. When they come in, they check in with our behavior monitor, her name is Gina. They'll kind of rate themselves of how they're feeling during the day. That's what these little guys up here are for. And this one means, hey, I'm doing great, stoked about today. This one's like, I don't know if I really wanted to come to school today. And then they have each of these little periods that they go through and that they're going to get rated throughout the day. All right. And they can get a 1, a 2, or a 3, depending on how well they do, 3 being better. And ultimately, we want them to make at least 21 points. Okay. One of the key parts to this is how do you set the goal? There's more than 21 points available on this, and initially, and I could probably take this back to a program. There's the Education Behavior Planning program, which has tons of great information. If you just Google that, you get all kinds of stuff, and that's what a lot of this comes out of. Their recommendation is you start at about 50% of the total amount of points, and that seems pretty easy. However, you want the kids to feel the success right away. You don't want them to be struggling right off bat, not making their goal each time, because then it's not motivating. But if they're seeing the success, you do that consistently, and then at some point you can raise the bar. All right, and I'll show you on our data kind of how that looks too. But at any rate, throughout the day, the teacher rates them, or teachers rate them through this. They come back at the end of the day. They count up all their points themselves. Initially when you start this program, one of the coolest things about this is that there's a ton of flexibility, a ton of variety of how you can do things. So for instance, one way you could do it is the behavior monitor or whoever your check-in, check-out person is, counts it with the kids, and they're keeping track of the data. It's also really cool if you have some kids who can just count it and keep track of their own data. They graph it and they chart it, and then they can see how they're doing compared to their goal. There's lots going on there. as well, once they start to be consistent and they're doing a great job, they can start self-rating themselves. Like you could have one goal that's teacher-rated over here, the same goal is self-rated over here. Kid rates themselves, yeah, I got a 3 in reading today. Teacher says, you know what, though, I actually saw, a 1 today, and here's why. And you guys have a little conversation about that. And that helps the kids become a little bit more accountable for their own behavior. Lots and lots of stuff. I could probably go on for quite a while about this, but I'll go ahead and move on. Plenty of resources out there we can share. Now, one thing we know about doing intervention is it's really important to monitor how effective intervention is. Otherwise, we're just kind of hoping it's working and it may not be or whatever else. So I'm going to really talk about progress monitoring with some of these interventions as well. This graph got a little wonky in Google, but essentially what you have is a check-in, check-out. This is one of our students' actual graphs, and this red line would indicate where that kid is on their goal. That's their goal line. So we want all their data points to be above this goal line, and then you can see we raised it here. Hopefully you guys can see my mouse. I imagine you can. And then raise it again. So it's getting progressively more challenging as this student is showing us that they're consistently able to meet that goal or exceed that goal for each day. You can see there's a couple little down points here. One thing that's neat about this too, as you're doing a little bit more specific behavior planning and things, is you can really look back at these days and say, well, what's it about these days? Is there something that we notice consistently about these low points? Maybe a setting event that occurred each time or something like that that maybe caused that kid to have a harder time. So anyway, it's really good to have this data for each kid so you can see how they progress in this program. Okay. So just real quick, I'm just going to throw it out there. Any questions on that? That was a very much a fast crash course in it. I gave you guys a whole lot of information in a very quick amount of time. There's probably something I wanted to tell you that I forgot to tell you. Do you guys have any questions about check-in, check-out?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Barbara from Cody.
Cool.
Is there a specific resource, website, or book that outlines the check-in and check-out, or?
So I like the, I cannot remember the woman's name who did it, but the educational behavior planning or education behavior planning program, and I think she actually has within that, and honestly, I think if you Google it, everything is free on her site. It has graphs and stuff that's pre-made like in Excel that all you do is you plug in the kids' stuff. If you're utilizing Swiss for like the progress monitoring of it, it has its own section for doing check-in, check-out also. She also really outlines kind of how to set goals and how to work with all those different pieces. Do you have something, Wendy, you want to add to that?
It's the one, the video.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's actually called the Behavior Education Program.
Told you that's what it's called.
Yeah. He was really, really close. And there is a DVD that you can purchase. I think it's about $100. Dr. Leanne Hawken and others. I can't remember all of them. Yeah, I also said that to you. Yeah, he did. I heard him. She's out of the University of Utah, so she's not too far from us. But I was just looking on the APBS website, because in the past she's done half-day trainings at APBS, and I haven't gotten, I can't see that she's going to be there, but she will often go to these big conferences and offer half-day training sessions, and she gives you really good information on check-in, check-out. But the Behavior Education Program has a triangle on the front of it, and you can Google it and it will pop right up.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks, Wendy, for all the saves on that one. Okay, so I'm going to jump into mentoring now, if there's nothing else. Now, we've talked about some different mentoring type things, like the check and connect, or even, honestly, doing the meaningful work as a form of mentoring as well. I'm going to talk about it in the most basic sense, which is really just simply assigning an adult to an at-risk student to really just hang out and have a good time. One of the things we found that was really powerful with this is that there was no real task demand. You don't have to earn this. What it comes down to is we said, you know what, we're going to have some adults who are available to play a simple game, to build a positive relationship with students. They only have to meet, even just one time per week. And really, like I said, this isn't contingent on their behavior. They could blow it that week. They could have a bad week, but yet they still have this opportunity to go meet and form a relationship. And the whole idea of it is that, our kids have relationships with their teachers, but it's nice to have an additional relationship with an adult in the school that is guaranteed to be a positive relationship. And really, the mentor can just ask some questions about how things are going, listen to the students. One of the things that we saw, I know at the high school up here, is that they were doing a mentoring program a while back. And one of the issues they ran into is it turned a little bit too much into, so how's your classes going? Did you get that assignment turned in? And that actually kind of turned the kids off a little bit. I think it's okay to listen to their woes and to find out what's going on. However, I think for it to be more effective, it's really nice if you just sit down and just have a good time without any real task demand added to that. And this one, mentoring, and here's the other thing that Wendy was talking about, and then I'll share with how you kind of progress monitor this because it's a little harder. There was a couple other things. I'll just let Wendy talk about these real quick.
Okay, sorry, probably had a misplaced slide here. You may have heard of HUG, hello, update, goodbye, and that's more for elementary students. I always thought that was kind of cute and catchy. But basically, I shared with you the Check and Connect. This is kind of a mentoring program on steroids. Some of these are, they don't take as much in terms of resources and time and energy to implement. So this is a very informal pairing of a preferred adult, and it's just, hello, how's your morning? And you kind of see where they are this morning, and then it's like, okay, see you later. And they might check in at lunchtime. They could check in at the end of the day. It's super flexible, but it's basically just pairing a couple of people together, and they make a point to touch base with that student a couple times a day. You can find information on pbis.org. These presenters here are the last names. I might butcher them if I try to say the first one, but they presented and they wrote a paper on hello, update, goodbye, and you can find it on pbis.org. Connections is another mentoring program that I learned about when I went to the Safe and Civil Schools conference. It was new at that point, so this has been maybe like 3 summers now. It was just coming out, and it's really pretty novel because it took elements of check-in, check-out, and check and connect and combined them together. It was a web-based behavioral intervention program. But what was really cool is they had their own scoring sheets, their own Scantron sheets. So kind of the card that Josh showed you, those were, it was a template, and then they had a scanner that they used a regular scanner, but they somehow connected it to their software, and it did their thing. And I thought, I'm going to give this about a year or two to see how it works. But I think someone on another platform said that they were using it and it was working quite well. So that is called Connections. It's a Safe and Civil Schools program that Dr. Mickey Garrison, I don't know if she developed, she's promoting it, so I'm not sure of the connection there, but you can certainly find information about that. And then lastly, the school-based mentoring, very flexible, where you just talk with your staff about some students who are at risk. And I have this great video that I show that gets everybody feeling really good and about mentoring, and then you say, okay, who wants to sign up to be someone's mentor? And boy, after you show this little video clip, they have a hard time saying no. So you kind of get them at a weak moment, but it's really informal. And like Josh said, it's just like connecting and having fun with a kid and making sure that every day you're just noticing, hey, I noticed this about you, or talking about common interests, or talking about something the student is interested in. So those are other versions of mentoring that aren't so complex to implement. And my guess is they're very, very effective as well. They just don't have articles written about them.
Perfect, thank you. And one other thing about mentoring is that it's probably one of the easiest things that you can set up, especially if you're doing an informal version of it. it really comes down to getting some staff who have flexible schedules and then, getting them assigned to some kids and giving them some games to go play or whatever it is. But at the same rate, it's also kind of difficult to kind of conduct fidelity checks on that and to see if staff are consistently meeting with those students. And it's also kind of hard as a whole to kind of see how effective mentoring is. And so I'm going to show you probably the least effective way to progress monitor, but it seems to be one of the only ways that I can find that really, aligns to mentoring. And that is just simply looking at things like office discipline referrals. And so this would just be a little bit of data from a student. And really, again, if you have kids who are at risk, they're being, they're having office discipline referrals or timeouts or whatever it is, your hope would be that if they're feeling more comfortable at school, if they're feeling like they want to be there more because of something like mentoring, you would hopefully see a change in that and you would see a reduction in office discipline referrals. So I'm going to just put that caveat out that there's not, at least that I know of, a great way to measure this other than simply say, hey, are the kids really just doing better? Do they seem happier at school? Are there less office discipline referrals? It's a little bit more anecdotal. But what I've found is that many of our at-risk kids really, truly do, especially in the younger grades, they really have a good response to the mentoring program, and they really enjoy being able to connect with those adults each week. So, again, crash course, real quick. Any questions on mentoring? All right. I think this is the last thing I'm going to talk about. It might even be the last thing we're going to talk about. So we're just about to wrap this up. One other thing that we really tried to put into place in our school was some social skills groups. And I think you guys all see this. It seems like more and more all the time, every year, kids come to school with less and less social abilities. Video games and things like that are kind of taking over. Even just having conversations with other people outside of texting is becoming kind of a rarity. And so it seems like our social skills are having difficulties. And what we're finding is kids don't know how to deal with conflict. They don't have great boundaries. All kinds of different things come into place with this. And so unfortunately, and I'm sure there's always been kids who've had to be explicitly taught social skills, but it seems like there are more and more kids who really, it has to be purposefully taught to them. And so it seems like there's a lot more research now going into social emotional programs and things like that on how do we teach the masses about social skills, but at the same time, we have some of these at-risk kids that we need to really give some targeted instruction to. So I'm not going to talk a ton about each of these different individual programs. Just a few of them that I'm a little bit familiar with, and maybe Wendy can chime in here, is the aggression replacement training, which really, this is a bit of a difficult program for our younger kids. This really works a lot better in the upper middle school and high school. And it has 3 different areas that it looks at. It looks at some anger management type stuff. It looks at some social skills, like skill streaming. And so there's a lot of modeling and role playing and things like that that are involved with that. Typically, I've actually tried it with the younger kids. The situations that are put forth in that program are too difficult for them to be able to work through. It really is more of a secondary program. Whereas the tough kids social skills and second step really can run through the whole K-12 spectrum. These can be utilized for all of those. I won't go into the details with those other than all of these are great programs, but you will get, like I said, a bit more of an age range with some of these other programs. Is there anything else you want to add, Wendy, in terms of the social skills programs?
No, those look really good. I'll just say that I am a fan of Second Step, and I've used that for many years. I started using it in the elementary and then moved it into the middle school, and I really like their updated middle school curriculums because they kind of have this multimedia approach, and they use video, and they've included things on cyberbullying and internet safety, and I think it's really, really good. It's hard to find a social skills or social emotional learning curriculum that middle schoolers will respond to, and so I thought that was good. It's the developers it's Committee for Children. So if you Google Second Step, it'll probably come up, but just remember Committee for Children, and then you'll see the whole array of Second Step programming. So I've used that one for years, and I am a fan.
Super cool. I think one of probably the primary keys to the social skills instruction is there needs to be an opportunity for the correct social skills to be modeled and then as well practiced. Social skills groups don't really work if it's an adult and a kid. It needs to be multiple students put together to work on that all have similar deficits in their social skills. And then as well, one thing we found in the younger kids, especially the ones who are a little bit more challenging, maybe have disabilities and things like that, sometimes even the role plays are difficult for them. So utilizing more of a game playing, collaborating, those different kinds of activities where they may not be role playing it outright certain scenarios, but they're actually utilizing the social skills maybe without even knowing it. Okay, this is another one that's kind of tough to look at progress monitoring, but I did go through and I looked through, we utilized the FAST system for a lot of our academic stuff, and as well you could do some progress monitoring for behavior in that system. And the kids, you get what's called the SABRS screening tool. You could utilize that 3 times a year, but then you have the what's it called, the direct behavior rating is useful every week. You could be doing this. And so the way this works is that once the kid is given the SABRS assessment, it will kind of outline what are some areas socially, academically, and emotionally that this kid is weak based on that rating scale from the teachers. Right here, I just have some social stuff that's kind of brought up. So appropriate interactions with others was an area this kid had a harder time with, and respect for personal boundaries. In which case, you can set up a behavior rating that you can do every single week. You pick a time where this kid is most likely to demonstrate either the non-behavior or the behavior that you're looking at, and then you would watch them and you would see how many appropriate interactions with others did this kid have, right? Now, this is a positive pro-social behavior that I'm measuring here. The cool thing about that, and there are some inverse behaviors, inappropriate behaviors that you could measure as well, but the neat thing about the pro-social behaviors being monitored is that if you look at office discipline referrals, all we see is less problematic behavior. You don't get to see if there's an increase in good pro-social behavior. So this rating system is really nice to be able to see, are my kids growing with these different skills? And then you can see also here the respect for personal boundaries. Some of them also have an intensity slide on there. Those are typically the behaviors that are problematic, such as disruptive outbursts or physical aggression. You would say, well, how often did I see that and how intense were they? This is a great tool to really be able to look at the social skills. In fact, this is the best tool I've seen to be able to monitor this weekly and to be able to see good pro-social behaviors actually going up. And those are things that you could be targeting within your social skills instruction. And then this is what the graphs would essentially look like. And so this one you can see there's kind of blurry, but there's an academic and there's social, and these are 2 different behaviors that they're monitoring. And obviously these are pro-social behaviors because as time goes on, we want to see more of those happening. So that's it in terms of the social skills. And this is a great tool. Like I said, it's part of the FAST system. I'm sure there are some other tools out there. I'm not familiar with them, but like I said, it's really neat that we can finally say not only are we measuring the negative and problematic behaviors, but we can also look at, is there a way to measure some of these good pro-social behaviors? Do you guys have any questions on anything that we presented today? It's a crash course in Tier 2 interventions. We shared 5 of them with you guys. Again, that's, at least for me, in the school I work at, UNM Meadows, we really just focus on 3 of those, and that seems like it's plenty. I can see there are some other kids that maybe we'd want to look at some of the other stuff with, but you don't want to do too many of these programs in your school. You really want to, like Wendy said, get really good at a couple of them so that they're really highly effective. So throw some questions at us. Okay, you guys know everything there is to know then. That's good. And again, if you guys have any other questions that arise in the future, other resource needs, obviously you can get a hold of Bart, and then he can get a hold of us. We'll share this presentation just as we shared them all, or at least the PowerPoint, and then as well, this is being recorded, so it'll be on the I think it's the WIN website through the state. So if there's nothing else, we're all done, you guys. Thank you so much for listening.
Josh, sorry, this is Barbara. I did have one more question.
Yeah, what's up?
So I've been really hearing a lot and wanting to try a check-in and check-out with a handful of students.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think, right now, we don't currently have one person that would kind of coordinate that. Could it be effective to get maybe a handful of people, so it would be sort of more like the mentoring you were talking about, but I'd like to do kind of the more formal check-in, check-out, but I think I would need to get help from a few people just to have the manpower to do it kind of mid-year.
And how many kids are you looking at?
I would say probably 8 to 10.
And this is just in one school?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would think, and you think that you don't have one person who would have enough time, because I'm, really, aside from the setup where you're actually going and working with the teachers and you're creating the goals, it probably takes, I'm thinking our behavior monitor, I think she does at least 8 kids right now, about 15 minutes in the morning and another 15 in the afternoon at the end of the day. So it's about a half an hour just to do the actual, checkouts and things like that. And then she has like, various prizes and things that the kids get if they meet their goal, which is a whole other aspect I didn't even get to talk about. So it's about 30 minutes a day is what you're looking at in terms of a commitment. I think, honestly, the best thing I would say, and I could be wrong on this, but the fewer people you have, the better. Like, the more well-trained and more dialed in they are on that, and the more consistent the program is, the better. Doesn't mean you couldn't have more than one. It is nice if you just have one person that's centralized that the kids can all go to, and they know every single day, this is where I go, this is where I go at the end of the day. But if you have 2 or 3 people, I guess, who are in areas that they have that much time that they could do that, you can kind of split those kids up, just so long as those kids are consistently going to that one person in each of those groups. Does that make sense?
Yes, and so the kids go to them. They don't run around and find the kids.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it. Otherwise, it'd be way too time-consuming. They just come. We have them just kind of line up. They've just gotten used to getting lined up. They check in. They go over what their goal is. They talk about what their points are. We've had a couple different modifications that have occurred over time. We've had a couple kids who are sly enough that they try to not go back to class right away because they're like, oh, we're down, check in, check out. Where we have the behavior monitor write what time they checked in the morning on the paper so that the teacher can then see. There's little things like that, little quirks you have to work out.
Yeah.
But I forgot where I was going with that point. But, yeah, you could do it with a couple people, but have all the kids go to them.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Okay. Anything else out there, guys? Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and sign out then. I sure appreciate all of you guys listening to our webinar, and we'll talk with you guys later. I don't really know how to sign out, but I'll figure it out.
Stop sharing.
Stop doing that. It's probably a way to end this.